All right, so here's where it gets even more fun, and the fretboard becomes less and less of a mystery and makes way, way, way more sense. All right, that should be exciting. Um, Everything's about to make a lot more sense right now. So here we go. Remember, we're talking about one string scales. So let me review again. Let's assume I start on G on the 3rd fret on the low E string, and I'm going to play a one string scale along the E string. Okay? All I'm going to do is start on 1, since I know G is the key note, then I'm going to follow the number pattern like this on one string. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then 1. And I can go backwards too. 1, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Okay, here's something I want you to understand. First of all, we played a major scale on one string, right? How many strings does your guitar have? Your guitar, if it's a normal guitar, your guitar has 6 strings. Guess what? Your whole guitar is made up of 6 one strings. This means that whatever the number pattern is, whatever the spacing of the numbers is on one string, that same exact pattern applies on every single string. All right? So let me show you how you're going to play the same scale on any other string on your guitar using the exact same one string scale pattern that you already learned. So remember, we need to know 2 things in order to play a one string scale. The first thing we need to know is, well, what is the actual pattern of notes I need to play? And the other thing I need to know is, well, where do I start? Remember, we start on note number 1. Note number 1 starts wherever the key note is. So if we're going to play in the key of G major, G is our key note, which is right here on the 3rd fret on the low E string. Now all I have to do is follow the major scale pattern. Perfect. I just played a G major scale. So if you can use that same one string scale pattern on every single string, well, remember we need to know 2 things. We need to know the pattern, the one string scale pattern, which we already know. The other thing we need to know is, where does it start? Where is the key note? So if we go to any other one of these strings, let's go to the D string, okay? That is, you should know where the D string is by now. This is the D string, and if I already know the pattern I need to play on one string to make a major scale, the only other thing I need to know is, where do I start? Well, if we're in the key of G, G is the key note, that means we start number 1 on the key note, which is G. So what I need to do is find out where a G note is on this D string. I'll say that again because I'm throwing out a bunch of letters and that can sound confusing. What I need to do is find my G note on the D string. Okay, if you're not familiar with the natural notes, I would highly, highly, highly recommend going through the No Nonsense Notes program. You're going to be able to learn really, really quickly all of the natural notes on every single string. That's going to make your life way, way easier. All right? So again, what I need to find is a G note on the D string. I happen to know that it's right here on the 5th fret on the D string. That's my G note. Okay, so if I know where G is, all I have to do now is just follow the major scale pattern. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 1. Okay, I started right here on the 5th fret. Now that's in a different place than on the low E string. So on the low E string, our G note is on the 3rd fret. So let me show you the difference between these 2 strings. So if I start on the E string, of course, if we're playing in the key of G major, I'm going to start my major scale on G, of course. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 1. What if I want to play that same scale, a G major scale, on the D string? What I need to do first is find my G note, which is right here on the 5th fret on the D string. All I need to do now is follow the major scale pattern. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 1. If you can hear it, these two scales are 1 octave apart. So if this G note, that's a lower G note, this G note, which we started on the D string, is 1 octave higher. If you don't know what an octave is by now, again, go back and review the introduction where I explain what an octave is, and where I explain a little bit more about the notes. You should really at this point know what an octave is, or what I mean when I say the word octave, okay? Here's the lower octave of G, here's the higher octave of G. Now check this out, I can actually play both of these scales at the same time. So all I'm going to do on my picking hand, all I'm going to do is just pluck the same strings at the same time. All I have to do is follow the major scale pattern again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 1. Sounds pretty cool, huh? I bet you've heard a sound like that before. Now I'm on 5, 4, 3, 2, and back to 1. So let me show you how to do this on another string. So you want to be able to play a 1-string major scale on every single string, okay? What if we, let's say the high E string here, the thinnest string. How do we play a G major scale on 1 string on the E string? Okay, it's really simple. We need to know 2 things. We need to know the pattern to make a major scale on 1 string, the pattern of numbers, which you already know, and we also need to know where to start. So on this high E string here, my G note happens to be right here on the 3rd fret. All I have to do now, since I know that's 1, I know G is the key note, so I know wherever I start on the key note, that's note number 1. Now all I have to do is follow the pattern. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 1. Now that's pretty cool, because you can now, after you learn this lesson, after you practice this lesson, you can now play 1-string major scales on every single string as long as you know where the key notes start. Okay, again, go back to the No Nonsense Notes program if you don't know where all the natural notes are yet. It doesn't have to be perfect. You should just have a reasonable idea of where the notes are, okay? But you can now, after you practice this lesson, you can now play major scale on 1 string on every single string on your guitar. And the last thing I'll show you is this. You remember whatever string we play a major scale on. Let me play the G major scale. So I'm going to start on the 3rd fret. I'm going to follow the number pattern. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1. And guess what? I'm already on 1, so I can just keep going. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Right? I can extend to this edge of the fretboard. If I come all the way back down to G, I know I'm on note number 1. Now I can go backwards, or I can go down the scale. So 1, 7, and then 6. My point is, I covered the entire fretboard playing the same major scale. As long as I, 1, know where to start, number 2, know how the pattern works. It's really that simple. So after you end up practicing this lesson, on every single string now, you should be able to play a major scale extending to each edge of the fretboard, extending across the entire fretboard on every single string. Okay? Every single string. That means, congratulations, it's only going to get easier, I promise, and we're going to work on this more in the future, but this is the first time, probably, that you are able to play all of the right notes everywhere across the fretboard, okay? Let me demonstrate one other string to extend across the fretboard, just as a further example. So let's assume we're going to play our G major scale on the D string. I'll say that one more time. We're going to play a G major scale in the key of G major starting on the D string. So if we're in the key of G, I need to find my G note. That's the key note. I need to find my G note on the D string, which is right here. If that's the key note, that's note number 1. So I'm just going to follow the major scale pattern. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Now I'm back to 1. I'm just going to keep going. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now I'm going to go backwards until I can't go backwards anymore on the fretboard. I know I'm on 4. 3, 2, 1, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 7, 6, 5 is right here, behind the nut. Okay? So again, you should be able to play, by the end of this lesson, you should be able to play any major scale, actually, across any one of the 6 strings all the way up and down the fretboard. Now, if that sounds kind of confusing, I would really suggest that you go back to the beginning of this particular module, start at the very beginning and go through it again, because like I said, this is one of the most important lessons in this entire program. So really make sure you got it. But it's really simple. I know you won't have a problem with it after you work with it for a little bit. So enjoy, and I'll see you in the next lesson.